Episode 1, The Window on Genesee Street. An envelope bearing the familiar letterhead of the Cayuga County Historical Society arrived on a Tuesday morning in October 1880. Young Stanley Kowalski, winded from climbing 3 flights of stairs to my humble East 23rd Street apartment, delivered the letter and awaited his tip. My heart quickened as I recognised the formal script of the Society's secretary. Mrs. Hunt, Secretary David Dunning wrote, "The Society wishes me to convey their warmest regards and hope you are well. As one of Auburn's native daughters, we understand you possess irreplaceable accounts of our village's foundational years. We formally request that you address our January 1881 meeting about your early memories of Auburn and the notable figures who shaped our community." I set the letter down and gazed at the endless stream of carriages, omnibuses, and pedestrians moving along the street below. From dawn until well past midnight, New York pulsed with energy. How different it was from the view I had known as a child. This thought came to mind instantly, just as they tend to do now that I've celebrated my 70th birthday. I was no longer a widow in a Manhattan apartment, but a girl sitting on the porch of our Genesee Street home, watching a different parade of humanity pass by our house. The Seneca Turnpike was our connection to the world, and from the porch, I saw the American migration with all its hope and heartbreak. Stagecoaches and canvas-covered wagons creaked past, loaded with entire families, rocking chairs strapped to the sides, children's faces peeking out from under the cloth, milk cows tied behind. "Where are they going, Papa?" I had asked my father countless times. "West, sweetheart." He would answer, settling into the chair beside me, "Always west, looking for something better than what they're leaving behind." By 7 or 8, I understood something about that westward stream. These weren't just people relocating. They symbolised the promise of the revolution. Later, as a young woman, I too became part of that same stream. I packed my belongings, a few necessary and cherished items, and travelled toward what I hoped would be a better life. The girl who had once watched the caravan pass her porch had ultimately joined it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Auburn remains vivid in my memory. I can still see our old parlour, smell the smoke from my father's forge, and hear the evening flute music drifting across Fort Hill. The sights and sounds of my New York neighbourhood often trigger these reveries, pulling me back to Auburn. This morning, the invitation from the Society opened a door to the past. I thought of William Henry Seward, Secretary of State, target of assassins, counsellor to presidents, who had once been a sandy-haired boy who rode past our house with the Miller sisters, just another part of Auburn's small community. His death 9 years ago took away many stories and memories of our shared life. I treasured the letters he had written me, filled with his reflections on Auburn and our mutual friends from those earlier days. The Society said my stories would help bridge Auburn's past and future. At my age, this might be my last chance to present the stories that shaped my life and the community that raised me. With so many from my generation already gone, dear William among them, this responsibility feels urgent and needed. I decided to accept their invitation and write the paper. I would take a train to Auburn and present it at the Society's rooms in the Seward block. However, my paper wouldn't enumerate names and events chronologically. Instead, I would craft a paper showing a more elusive side of growing up in that specific place and time. The paper needed a writer with an eye for detail and the ability to write those observations imaginatively. So I picked up my fountain pen and began to write. Not my acceptance of their invitation, that could wait until tomorrow, but the first tentative words of my story. The story of a homebound child who watched so many different people pass her home as her community transformed from a hamlet into a beautiful town. My maiden name was Azuba Terry. I was born at Auburn in 1810, I began, then stopped. No, that was precisely the sort of beginning I wanted to avoid. I crumpled the paper and started again. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, I wrote, and suddenly I was 7 years old again, watching the world roll past my door. Manhattan continued its relentless motion outside my window, but I was no longer watching. I was remembering, and in remembering, I was going home. Later that day, the sun beamed through my parlour window, casting golden light across the room. From my chair, I daydreamed as the procession of carriages, omnibuses, and pedestrians flowed along the street below. It never seemed to stop. The clatter of wheels on cobblestones, the rhythmic clip-clop of horses, and the far-off shouts of drivers all merged, transporting me back to Auburn. I was around 7, and on warm afternoons, I liked to sit on the front porch of our Genesee Street home and watch the traffic of settlers. It was too risky for me to attend school. The children might spread germs that could be deadly to me, while they learned their letters from primers and slates. Part of my education came from watching the flow of settlers travelling the Seneca Turnpike. Our house was in a good spot to watch the migration. Wagons and stagecoaches slowly passed, some heading east to Albany and beyond. Most, though, pushed west toward Buffalo, drawn by the promise of vast tracts of land and new opportunities. I thought the people in the stagecoaches and wagons all had a story. It became a sport for me to look for clues to their story. For instance, the well-maintained Conestoga wagons, pulled by matched oxen, belonged to families with means. Their canvas covers were clean, their wheels freshly painted, and their livestock in tow healthy and well-fed. Weathered wagons typically carried families who had likely risked a lot to make their journey. Their possessions, a spinning wheel tied to the wagon's side, a carefully wrapped mirror, and a milk cow trailing behind on a frayed rope. These were the brave ones, I thought, the ones risking it all for new possibilities. I saw a historic phenomenon from my porch, a great westward movement reshaping America. A loud omnibus rattling outside brought me back to the present. I smiled at the memory of my childhood stories, realising I had never stopped imagining stories about the travellers I saw. Even now, watching the urbanites below, I found myself inventing lives and purposes for them. As daylight faded, replaced by the glow of gas street lights and diminishing traffic, I remained at the window, still daydreaming. I then saw my calling to complete the paper, since I am a creative writer deeply interested in Auburn. If I possessed the skills to weave engaging tales from my observations of Genesee Street travellers, I would gladly apply that same focus to documenting some of Auburn's early stories, rather than presenting them as an uninspired bullet point type document. I'll write them as engaging, well-crafted narratives, saving them from obscurity and making them a joy to read. I finally went to bed, my mind teeming with ideas. I continued writing that next night, and more memories slowly returned. The faint sound of distant music on the evening breeze in my New York City home instantly took me back to Auburn's twilight. I can feel the wooden porch beneath my feet and smell the garden roses in the cool summer air. Evenings in Auburn on warm summer evenings were sometimes magical, not because of a string quartet playing at Stanford Hall, but from the pleasant sounds of flutes drifting across our village. Sporadically, as dusk settled in and supper concluded, an evening concert would quietly start on summer nights. The initial faint flute notes would emerge from Fort Hill's summit near our home, soon followed by a second, then a third. The musicians had strategically chosen this elevated spot on the hill, knowing its height would allow their melodies to drift across the village below. William Bostwick, Jr. was the heart of the group. He was the son of the Western Exchange Hotel owner and the young gentleman who often escorted my sister Hannah to social gatherings. There was also the capable Mr. John H. Hardenberg. He was the son of Colonel John L., who founded our hamlet in 1796, then called Hardenberg's Corners. John H. was the first child born in the hamlet in 1798. Later, Mr. Ashel Munger would join, bringing his talent to the hillside concerts. Together, they were the very sound of Auburn itself. Our home was close to Fort Hill. We could hear almost every note from our front porch. My family would gather whenever the group played, drawn by a cool breeze and the nice music. Hearing the music, Father would come to the porch and settle into his favourite chair. My sisters would arrange themselves on the porch steps, their summer dresses spread around them like flower petals. I would claim my spot, sometimes on my father's lap or curled up beside my aunt. The setting was always a treat. Once the music started, we'd quiet down and listen together. As it got darker, we became captivated by the music as we gazed at the moon and stars. The musicians sometimes left the hill to join us on our porch. These gatherings transformed it into an extraordinary drawing room. My sister would light more candles, their warm glow creating an intimate circle of light in the gathering darkness. The flickering flames would dance across the musicians' faces as they continued to play. Sometimes neighbours taking an evening stroll along Genesee Street would pause to enjoy the music. Mr. Bostwick would sit on the steps, his flute catching the candlelight as he played. Mr. Hardenberg would find a comfortable spot where he could see the group. Their music, so beautiful from a distance, became even more enchanting up close. But it wasn't just the music that made these evenings special. The conversations flowed between the musical selections. These educated men had seen the world beyond Auburn's borders, and their stories opened windows to places we had never imagined. They spoke of the cities they visited and the concerts they attended. Mr. Hardenberg sometimes recounted his father's tales from his days as a surveyor, dating back before the Revolutionary War. He spoke of a time when our hamlet was an untamed wilderness inhabited by Native Americans. Those stories about clearing land, building the first log cabins, and constructing a grist mill sparked my fondness for Auburn. Conversations on the porch introduced me to a broader world of ideas and culture. While my peers learned only from their primers and catechisms, I listened to stories of music and literature. The flutists did their best to be patient with my childish questions during these talks. My aunt later told me that Mr. Hardenberg would bounce me on his knee when I was a baby, even as a young girl. During quiet pauses in the music, he would often catch my eye and smile just at me as if I were his cherished friend. These special smiles only deepened my affection for him. It was then that the unique Auburn Symphony was born, blending the many sounds of the hamlet, the distant moos of cattle returning from pasture, the creaks of wagon wheels on Genesee Street, and neighbours calling their children home, all harmonising with the flute concerts. The Owasco River added another layer, its rushing waters flowing through our village and providing a constant, soothing murmur that served as a natural base to the flutes. Even the industrial sounds of our growing village, the hammering from my father's forge, the rhythmic thump of the mills along the river, and the whistle of the evening stage departing for Syracuse, became part of Auburn's unique evening symphony. As I grew older and Auburn changed, the evening concerts gradually stopped. The last concert I remember was especially touching. Just Mr. Bostwick playing alone on Fort Hill, his solitary flute bidding farewell to an era that was passing away. That lovely music has always remained in my heart. I recognize it instantly. It is as clear and beautiful as it was on those long ago summer evenings. Hearing it takes me back to the porch with all the people I loved, as we, too, created the Auburn Symphony's signature sound. These small, special details from our time are exactly what I have tried to capture here in my paper.